Before we get into this conversation about male desirability, I want to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Adam and Eve. You know who Adam and Eve is at this point, and I'm sure I don't have to explain what they do. But what I will make sure you know is that by using the promo code FD50, you can get 50% off a purchase, along with free shipping and handling to the United States and Canada. Further, they've been a great support of the channel, so please give them support and support yourself by checking them out at adamandeve.com. Remember, use promo code FD50. And now let's start the video.
Staying sexy is an all-day job. And for some of us, the end of the day is just the beginning.
You've got to see your relationships with women, your ability, your skill of dating, like a skill. So remember the video games that we used to play? We used to have characters and skills that you could level up and level up.
If I were truly courting you, I would not need flowers. I'd be 5 minutes alone with you in a drawing room.
How does it feel to be on the cutting edge of changing the way that we view black masculinity?
I don't feel like I'm on the cutting edge of shit. You are on the cutting edge of waking your bitch ass up and smelling the coffee.
Do women want feminine men? Now the answer to this, guys, despite who says what political agenda ABC parties have, the answer is an outstanding, absolute, undisputed no.
Undisputed no.
So being a content creator is great. I have zero complaints, zero whatsoever. However, if I were to complain about something, it would be that the process of like doing this and editing and watching your videos over, etc., it forces you to look at yourself a lot. And for anything that you don't like about yourself, that you want to change about yourself, or anything that has changed maybe for the negative, it is impossible not to notice. And so one thing that I've noticed since before I had 100,000 subscribers is that I may have gained a little bit of weight. At my age, with my health background and my family's health background, this is just not healthy to keep doing. So I have gotten back into exercising. And while I've never been a stranger to working out in the traditional sense, I just find myself completely bored doing cardio and lifting weights and curls or deadlifts or whatever the new shit is. So going into the end of 2022, I figured I'd trade in my traditional gym membership for a dojo in the world of kickboxing. So for 2 days a week for the past few months, barring a break for the holidays, COVID, or fighting YouTube to get a video done on time, I've been trying to learn the basics while getting healthy. I've always been interested in martial arts, and while it's not fun kicking a hard-ass bag with my shins, it is a new challenge, and the feeling of learning a skill helps drive me through any and all feelings of how bored I might get exercising or the ways I would often feel running on a treadmill for 30 minutes. And it can't hurt that I'm hopefully shrinking this fupa down a little bit. Even if my wife likes it, I'm not the biggest fan of it. She likes me. She likes my big arms. She likes my big legs. I am an older black man, and outside of being maybe a little bit taller or having a beard that connects, I feel pretty confident that I embody a pretty desirable body. However, this doesn't mean I am immune to the insecurities of how I look. And an easy reminder of how insecure you can sometimes get is when I first got in the presence of my kickboxing coach. Now, again, I feel pretty good about the way I look, but please believe when looking at Coach, I may have been a bit envious. My coach looks like Idris Elba's older brother. He is a Nigerian-born Brit who played some basketball in the UK and then switched to kickboxing later in his life. And a lifetime of athletics has built him into what most people imagine when they think of idealized physical black masculinity. It's impossible not to measure yourself up with other men. I think that's just a part of being human. And often when I run into men like my coach, I feel that pang of insecurity, but I also find comfort in thinking, well, you know, my wit and intelligence are the things that make me special and make me stand out. But then I heard my coach talk.
Your value isn't premised on the way you look. No matter what society teaches you, no matter what the feedback you get back from people in society, men and women, you must understand that basic truth that my value, my intrinsic value as a human being, as a man, it really isn't dependent on how I look. Because at the end of the day, this is something I remind myself of all the time, that this is just a shell.
And it's just like, yeah, like some brothers got it. It is what it is. So there's a minor intimidation factor when in the presence of guys who either through nature or immense effort both look and maybe sound like my coach. That said, I've never let it affect my opinion on who I am and what I'm capable of. People that know me know that while I was a late bloomer, once I started figuring things out, I was more than capable of attracting women. I married a beautiful, talented, amazing woman, and we have a fulfilling life together, regardless of the fact that I've never had a six-pack, I've never been over 6 feet tall, and before YouTube, I never really made a lot of money. I was successful and respected in my career path before YouTube, but that did not define who I was, nor did my looks. It was the entirety of who I was that made my life fulfilling in the ways it was before micro celebrity on YouTube. I say this to point out that I did not need the commercialized image of the alpha male to find happiness as a man or security in my own masculinity. The commodified image of the alpha male is mythological and really has never been a real thing. It's actually quite funny, in fact, to look at the current landscape of so-called self-help for men and see how bizarre some of the images are of what constitutes an alpha male and what constitutes desirability. And then when you weigh them against reality and history, it gets even more weird. It makes sense that many of the audience members that consume this type of content are boys and young men who just really don't know any better and probably haven't had much luck attracting women, because if they did, then they would probably know that the things that they're consuming that are supposed to help them attract women aren't really all that helpful. Guys like Myron Gaines and Andrew Tate and Sneeko will definitely be able to attract women and are in some way desirable. But what does that mean? And is young douchebag who works out a lot the only way to attract women? If you are not a child, then you know, of course, that's not the case. The reality is that desirability for men is a complex and deep concept that doesn't have one specific archetype or look. Anyone telling you that you have to look and be a specific way, a way that they also just so happen to be selling you, is lying. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because you remind me of one of my homeboys. It's so funny, you just said your slam poetry era. So like now I know you was a hoe.
Hey, yo,
But like, man, he would get stopped every 10 steps by a woman to say, hey, his name was, hey, what's going on? Hey, I saw your performance. Hey, you know, da, 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 da. And I would be like, nigga, what are you doing? See? Yes.
I'm crying. Yo. Sometimes it just be like that, though.
No. There's a specific energy and persona that I think some dudes have that is absent from any type of like explicit physical presentation that attracts women.
I want to say it's soft boy non-derogatory, if that makes sense. Like when you give off a vibe somehow, you know, maybe it's the shortness, maybe it is the like being a little broader, maybe it is the soft-spokenness or the wanting to be in touch with something as feminine as writing, which like is kind of a misnomer anyway. But like that profiling like makes women, I feel, more inclined to engage.
The app that I most prefer is called Hinge, and Hinge is just an app like Tinder or Bumble where it allows you to put specific prompts and answers. Like you can select a prompt that'll be asking you a question. You can answer it in a funny way or whatever, or you can answer it by adding a photo with a caption, and you can do that like a few different things like that. But the most matches I have ever, it was like a voice prompt where it asks you a question and you can answer with a voice message, right? And by far the most matches I've ever gotten is from that prompt of me I'm like kind of just joking around, making up some situation. I don't even remember what the prompt is about. Like, cause I've experimented with different photos, like, you know, photos of me looking, you know, of my body, photos of me, what I feel like is most attractive, other photos that I don't feel like are as good, but I just put up there because you have to have a certain number. And you can tell that which thing on the profile that they specifically like. But for the people that are like in that headspace of like this, nothing I'm doing is working, I think the jaw maxing Chad stuff doesn't really translate like as cleanly as you'd think, because you can just be creative with it. Like I said, a voice prompt is what people have matched with for the most. For me, that's just been my experience, and that's something that's not, innate, or that you have to train,
right,
5 years in the gym to get. It's just something you have to kind of think outside the box about.
We don't wake up and I don't like she doesn't. I've robbed her also of the pleasure and the joy of waking up next to your partner, all so that I could assume this physique and everything that if you ask her probably, she doesn't necessarily need. Like, it's a standard that I put upon myself,
right?
And a lot of these things are internalized to the point like where we're no longer doing it to cater to the demands of people itself, like, or to be desired. We're doing it to cater to an avatar that we believe people desire. But if you, as you probably know, like, if you talk to people that don't fit this mold, this avatar of desirability, they still hitting skins. They still got partners. They're still, in fact, a lot of them are getting a lot more, sex and things like that than fellas like me.
I was, when I grew up, I had a very unstable sense of self-esteem and self-worth. And I was very hard on myself and very perfectionistic. And I kind of had the mindset of I need to live life perfectly. And there was just various experiences through high school where I kind of came to realize it's more about living the most of life instead of the best life possible. So it was a bit of a slight mindset shift. And it made me take myself less seriously. I started to, practice mindfulness. I got really into philosophy. I was traveling. I was kind of just doing things out of their intrinsic worth instead of, anything else. And for a while before this, I was going on those forums and just very looking back, I'm going to cringe. Everybody does this, I guess, when they're younger, but
I read the pickup artist book. I don't remember the name off my head. The Game. I read The Game when I was in my early 20s.
Yeah. And nowadays it's even more the manosphere and stuff like that. People could find Andrew Tate or, Sneeko or even, Peterson kind of to kind of tell you you need to, these are the correct ways to be a man. So my idea of what the right way of living life was specifically, how can I be a good man? So it was very gendered from the beginning. So then when I adapted more of this kind of is why I got into Camus a lot, where it was this kind of absurdist, kind of existentialist take of just kind of not taking things so seriously. That ironically, is what allowed me to then achieve a lot of the stuff that I was valuing beforehand. You do become more desirable if you don't reek of desperation. If you just genuinely talk to other people because you want to, you go do things because you genuinely want to. That is a very attractive quality.
For this video, I'm defining desirability as a mass-presenting person's ability to embody and perform traits that those who are attracted to men find appealing. This is a somewhat nebulous and flexible definition because the reality is attraction and masculinity is a nebulous and complex thing. But in general, basically it's you're a dude, and what is it that you do that makes people that are attracted to dudes attracted to you? Right? Makes sense? Now, you might want to write this broad definition off as lefty overthinking to pander to my audience of Gen Z, they, thems, but then you'd be an idiot and probably not even watching this video in the first place. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to convince you otherwise. But it does bring up the first major thing that I want everyone who's watching to consider, which is how warped and inaccurate our understanding of male desirability tends to be, greatly because of the things we see and are told as boys and men, namely that it's almost always those types of reactionary conservative men that are dictating the conversation when they are not the people that you're trying to be desirable for. Or are they? And I don't say that to insinuate this homoerotic nature of some of these spaces, but to consider why is it that it's other single men that are giving you all the secrets and information that you're supposed to have on how to attract women. That just genuinely doesn't make a lot of sense. First and foremost, understand that gender presentation and what is considered masculine and attractive for men has constantly changed throughout history. I don't care what your Alpha Male podcast folks told you 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, they would have told you something completely different. I could go back centuries to show you no shortage of images and art for men in a variety of presentations being depicted as being desirable while wearing what we consider today to be dresses and skin-tight pantaloons and even high heels. Fast forward just a few years ago, and Regé Jean embodied this desirability from that old time, completely driving the girls wild just by licking a spoon. And then just 30 years ago in my childhood, we saw a persistent image of gender non-conforming men being seen as the height of desirable, whether it was the glammed up images of Aerosmith or Poison, or maybe it was Tupac, a hip hop icon and a sex symbol. But if you look at the way Tupac was presenting from today's sensibilities, you see that Tupac wasn't giving you this classic super thugged out image. It was actually, I'm just saying, when you put your hands like this, that means something. There's a lot of leather involved there. So that may be a reach, but one undeniable example of transgressive sex appeal for men by women is Prince. For those too young or too uncool to know, Prince is an icon in like a half a dozen different spaces. He's an icon of black music. He's an icon of rock music. He's got to date the greatest Super Bowl halftime performance of all time. He's something of a queer icon as well, despite being completely straight. And with that, probably most interestingly, he's a sexual icon and mostly for women. If Prince had come out today in the current political climate, he would be so polarizing that we might not even get the great music we got in the 80s and 90s. Because people would call him woke or too soft or some shit, which is still a bunch of BS, because even today, men are embodying desirability while completely flouting the normative images of what traditional masculinity is. So guys like Lakeith Stanfield, Nick Jonas, Lil Uzi Vert, Machine Gun Kelly, and others have significant fan bases while queering masculinity.
Also, just sort of say, I think my experience with masculinity and trying to be, I guess it is what it is. It's like trying to be more masculinized has been something that I've run into all the time. It's like this big wall of like, you know, I've been a huge fan of hip hop since a very early age. I think part of it was like, man, those guys are cool and maybe I can do that. You know, I like words, so maybe that could be a way that I can get there. Like, I like sports, maybe I could do that, you know? Yeah. And trying to find these paths to where I could avoid this feeling like I was some sort of thing that people didn't understand and didn't really want any part of. My first 3 years of high school I actually did in Santo Domingo, which was a huge culture shock change for me and a lot of things. And there was just, you know, I guess puberty, you know, like you go through puberty and then 11th grade shows up and you're all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm not that bad looking, right? And like, yeah, you just, you know, I'm tall, like there's some things going on. What made it sort of clearer to me was when I started, when I came back to New York in senior year, and I just saw that I was being perceived a certain way a bit more, without any of my input, really. I mean, there were certain things I learned how to get a haircut and things like that, but you know, yeah, there was definitely a transformation that was mostly unwitting. And then at some point, you know, one of my friends that I'm still cool with to this day, when I came in the senior year, she told me later that when she saw me, she was like, oh, great, another fuckboy in this high school or whatever. And I was like, really? You thought that? And she was like, no, yeah. And it's, you know, you look a certain way. And then I talked to you and I was like, oh, he's actually cool. And I was like, oh, wow. So tell me about the fuckboy thing again. Like, what was it specifically?
When I was sort of in a situation where I was, you know, kind of engaged with a woman and flirting with a woman, my awareness of certain traits were a lot more pronounced. Like, for example, my height. Mm-hmm. Like I'm 5'6", totally fine with that, perfectly average for a gymnast, but it's not very tall. I know that I'm like a pretty short guy. Women love a tall man. Like it's surprising how important that is for a lot of them. And I did run into some issues with that. Like there would be a woman that, I was kind of interested in, maybe hitting it off with, or, like reading a bio and like, wow, she seems really cool. And then it's like, those above like below 5'10" don't apply kind of stuff. Right.
Yeah.
And so, there's a lot of that with men, not so much. In fact, a lot of gay men who are bigger, like a short guy because of the height difference. For me, dating women and men and like, multiple genders, really, it was really, kind of figuring out that no one was going to be interested in me if I was pretending to be something I'm not. And even if I could pretend to the point where I could convince them, which like as a trans person, I have a whole lifetime of experience doing that. But even if I could play this role in such a way that it was like really believable, then I'm in a situation where I have to keep playing a role. And again, I spent most of my life doing that. I'm not going to do it again. So my trans experience was really liberating in that sense because I had to perform the wrong gender for so long. I'm not going to do a performance of the right one. I'm just going to be like who I am.
Still, while Prince was being a major sex symbol, so was Burt Reynolds, Denzel Washington, Billy D. Williams, Mel Gibson. I don't want to insinuate that traditional masculinity as we see it today did not exist then, but the overall prominent ways that men and boys tend to think about being desirable has always been a spectrum. And if you focus only in on one area, then you're going to miss a lot of the picture. Like everybody knows the Giga Chad meme, right? This meme is kind of a cryptid, so I don't know exactly who this is. It's said to be based on a Russian model, but I can't quite confirm that he exists. Maybe he does. I've seen pictures, but everything looks fake and it's hard to find. Either way, he is called Giga Chad because he is supposed to be the epitome of what idealized desirable masculinity should look like, at least according to straight men. The absurdly strong jawline, the lean, almost grotesquely muscled physique, etc. But here's the thing that's going to be challenging for many people watching this video. This image is idealized to who exactly? I know this is a joke, that people don't actually think this is attractive, but the joke is still based in an idea that people think that this is somewhat attractive, and it's really not. And it greatly illustrates a gap in how men understand their own desirability versus how women perceive it. And I guarantee that to most women, a man with this type of physique is not really ideal. The idea for this video came from a TikTok I saw a while back where a guy was trying to figure out why he wasn't getting matches on online dating.
The simple answer is because their photos suck. They may think they have good photos. In fact, quite often they do. Maybe they were taken by a professional photographer, but it doesn't mean the photos don't actually suck. Like this guy. So he emailed me and he was like, dude, I am convinced that Tinder doesn't work for anyone who's not a Giga Chad because I'm not getting any matches. So we took a look at his photos and this is what we saw. We have one photo where he looks like a hitman. The second one, we can barely see his face. The third one where the lighting is insanely creepy and he looks superposed. And the fourth one, which has the same exact issue. Now this guy is definitely above average looking, but he's getting zero results again because his photos are bad.
So here's where we have the first major disconnect. A lot of men and boys center their perception of masculine desirability on what other men define as such. This guy in this picture looks like an axe murderer. The Giga Chad meme is grotesque looking, to be honest. It feels like something from the darkest sectors of deviant art. But clearly this guy took this pose from his image of what the Giga Chad would get on Tinder, and he's not getting it. There is an overvaluing of certain types of bodies and physical features and presentations of those bodies of being the most desirable when data and research tells us that women show interest in a variety of men's bodies and often find the typical ideal as understood by men to be not nearly as appealing as we think, at least in isolation. Again, to be clear, having a fit body for a man is going to make you more attractive to more women in a specific way. And that way is often for explicitly seeking sexual partners. There is a wide body of research that shows that men who are more muscular and or taller are seen as more desirable by women, having a greater sense of body image, and have more sex partners than non-muscular men. I will not be gaslighting you in this video and telling you that that is not the case. However, much of that same research also indicates that these men that look closer to the Giga Chad are also less likely to be seen as viable partners for long-term relationships. When it comes to being taken seriously and building connection, looking like this can get in the way. And I'd argue that it kind of goes both ways. And this kind of sucks for multiple reasons. Firstly, male body image dissatisfaction is a significant indicator of mental health issues such as depression and anxiety, possibly even drug abuse in young men. Yet pursuing that ideal body image, while it may lead to some more opportunities for short-term partnering, could also hinder one's capacity for more meaningful long-term partnering. It's a really awful paradox that a lot of men are putting in a ton of effort to look like the ideal for seeking out partners, but that ideal image ends up working against them for seeking out actual long-term partnership.
So basically from like grade 10, so I'm like 16-ish, I started to work out consistently, like 3 times a week, let's say. And I pretty much have done that ever since. Like there's times when I'm not as much and sometimes when I'm a bit more. But basically being able to actually be of decent like physical fitness. I was definitely just super skinny. That's what I mean. Like I was just very skinny.
Right.
I still am generally pretty skinny, but now I work out to where it's like noticeable that I have some degree of muscle. So that just definitely made me feel more confident. I wouldn't say it was like truly low, like to the where like I think I was definitely quite privileged in the sense like I don't think my self-image, my regular image, sorry, even growing up was ever that objectively by traditional standards that bad or considered ugly. But at the same time I was quite scrawny and I grew up like obviously like Indian in a very white community in Ottawa. My community was extremely white, so just feeling different for that sense. But overall, like I grew up with pretty low confidence. I'd say like it's only until really last year where I could say I definitely had more confidence, but I could actually like, look in the mirror and be like, I actually think I'm pretty attractive. Like that's a hard thing for me to even say.
They will spend time trying to reach that point with the hopes that it will provide something. And some people do this, like they kind of make it their life. Like I think gym culture, as important as I recognize it is for health, like people that do it for health, very rarely do I feel like, do I get the sense that the primary sort of adherents to gym culture are doing it for that reasons. They're doing it for aesthetics. They're doing it. They look at themselves in the mirror. They take photos. They compare themselves to the people around them. It's the pursuit of this body that when it is tied to that value, will never be enough. You'll never get to a point where what you've worked for is satisfactory in all the ways that one might think. Like for some people, it's like they like being ripped and that's fine. But you know what I'm talking about like
there's the guys that like enjoy working out and like doing stuff to their bodies. And then there's the guys that are like, once I get ripped, that'll show them. Then if you go back and consider the proposition of what it takes to look like the Chad combined with the actual benefits in terms of desirability, to me, it doesn't seem like it's all that worth it unless you are really that much into fitness, which if you are, awesome, keep doing that. If you're into being fit and working out for that reason, for actual passion for fitness, that's actually a really great thing for your desirability, which I'll get to later. However, if you're a skinnier guy or a fatter guy looking to looks max, I don't know if it's worth the effort to go super hard in this area, because when you listen to women and observe how desirability is often communicated in women's media, you see a very different story than what we understand from the perspective of men. The group of men with the most body image issues tend to be gay men. For every negative element about body image that I mentioned earlier, gay men have it worse. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Gay men have the deadly 1-2 punch of having both the societal pressure of presenting ideally for the male gaze and having that idealized image be embodied by the masculine ideal. So they have the pressure of wanting to be desirable to men, and then that image of desirability is explicitly defined through a masculine lens. And I'm bringing this up not to like, again, do some weird, you guys are actually gay stuff, but to kind of point out that the image of masculinity that men most see as appealing is actually one that's most appealing to other men, whether they be straight or gay. And what that should tell you is that straight men, on the other hand, might want to be the masculine ideal, but as I explained here, what that ideal looks like from the perspective of women can be very far from what the ideal looks like from the perspective of men. I already mentioned the they-them mass desirability that has always been around. A low-level analysis of the images of men created for and by women is a huge hint as to what women actually desire in men. The annual Sexiest Men Alive issues of People magazine, while not a perfect indication of what women like, clearly seeks to present an image of men that is warm and caring and engaged. These are still traditionally masculine men who are attractive and handsome in any traditional sense, but what they're presenting to be seen as actually desirable is not these chiseled physiques, but those chiseled physiques that they're presenting as desirable are hidden behind comfortable clothing and gentle smiles, not flexed out muscles with sweat and veins popping out their necks.
If you tie that to gender, it's from my argument is that you can be super masculine if you want to be aesthetically. You can perform that way because yes, some women are attracted to a rugged guy who's like really muscular and stoic and stuff, but you can't be that. That can't be your end all be all. There has to be a little bit of emptiness, a little bit of space for growth or nuance, adaptability, because, you know, taken to its extreme, that sort of gender fundamentalism or identity fundamentalism, especially with masculinity, could be harmful to other people. If you overtly want to prove that you are innately masculine, you could end up, you know, causing some form of domestic abuse. You could end up, you know, pathologically sleeping with a lot of people, becoming like a fuckboy, kind of not outliers. We want, at least for that first interaction, we want somebody that's pretty like plain, pretty like safe and secure, especially. And then I think you pair that with guys are probably not great with taking photos because they're not socialized to rely on pure aesthetics. They're supposed to rely on kind of competence and performance, and women are socialized to rely on aesthetics. So you're engaging in a platform that really favors people that are good at aestheticizing.
Right. Sisyphus makes a really good point here about how boys and girls are socialized differently when it comes to aesthetics and beauty. There are many more consequences for not being physically attractive for women versus men, and thus women and girls begin to figure out aesthetics and beauty at a very early age, and entire industries are built around aesthetics for women, while men are openly discouraged to learn these skills, and thus many go through life never having had a great grasp on how to assess how to make things look pretty. It's not some high-minded philosophical thing to say that women want men that make them feel safe and also seem safe, as in not a creep or a weirdo or someone who is operating with a lack of emotional intelligence. And what is desirable to women isn't always conveying dominance and strength and power, but conveying those features of being safe and being a provider or being a companion. Now, lookism and patriarchy mean that women will be more likely to attach those features to attractive people. But it's a complex bell curve, and hyper-focusing explicitly on looks is a good way to, one, completely misunderstand what women are looking for, and two, exert energy and personal resources in the wrong thing. Lots of women are looking for lots of different body types. Yes, being shorter or larger or super skinny will affect how you're perceived, but it doesn't preclude an absence of possible partners. Again, I'm not going to gaslight anyone to think that looks are not important, but you should consider how you assess what looks is as a man.
Like that's verbatim what happens. So like a lot of people think that, okay, like when I do this big glow up, like, you know, like I'm gonna get all kind of da-da-da-da. Not really. Like a lot of people actually, to like a certain extent, may feel as though like you're so attractive now that you probably get this a lot, and therefore I am not going to add to that. Like you have like almost like an ironic reaction to it, like
a backlash to an extent.
So like you gonna be mad at me, but like I really ain't had a whole face like that. Because keep in mind, coming from being fat and like being unattractive, being unworthy of affection, I still, even though like I was in this body, like I was still a fat guy. Like I was still a little fat chubby kid from high school.
People, I love meeting new people. I love first dates. I'm like not the type that doesn't. Yeah, I find them fun. But I do wonder how much of that is me like compensating for all those years where I never felt capable.
Right.
You know? because, and I think that may have came up in recent relationship where I was seeing someone, right? I regret that. I think it's hard to sometimes because I still think I'm in that process where I'm not feeling super in touch with and super truly confident where I'm able to be myself and not scared of losing people and all that. Sometimes it's hard to even read how you feel about situations, and it's hard to be like present and like absorb other people and be like, oh, I like this, I don't like that. It's hard to trust what you see, basically.
Yeah.
Just like a fog.
My wife loves my legs. You know what I'm saying? She like we're in bed and she'll literally be like, put your leg on me. And it sounds weird to tell another person when like you say it out loud. But you also, I know you know what I'm talking about.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Like 100% exactly this weekend, exactly what you're talking about. So it's like, and that's why I'm glad you're making this video and also like talking about it in this particular way. Because if we could, I do believe it maybe not as simple, but let's say a great first step to just let boys, not even men, boys know that like your body shape has people that like it. Like there are already women who like you for their own selfish reasons. Like this sounds weird to say out loud, but yeah, like my girlfriend likes my personality and my body for like selfish reasons that like I don't necessarily have to always understand, is what she told me. She's like, don't worry about that. You keep doing you. I'm with you because I like what you're doing. Yeah. And that is what a lot of boys are trying to get to. Right. How can I be so girls will like me? Yes. I don't want to just, I'm not saying be you because being you is cool. I'm saying be you because someone else is already gonna like that. They're already into that shit. You're not that weird.
CJ the X is a friend of the channel and one of the best people making content on this platform. You should check them out. In one of their videos, they made the following comment that has lived rent-free in my head ever since.
Capitalism apologists claim that money shows you where value is. If everyone works hard and everyone gives their money to the best goods and services and the market is free, then profit will end up where the best values are. Cool theory. Didn't work out. Profit isn't value. Value is value. Don't let them convince you they're the same thing.
Value equals value. I will avoid getting too deep into my leftist bag to break down why this statement is so profound, but I will point out that at least in the West, we have been conditioned to conflate value, a rather nebulous and abstract thing, with explicit concrete things like money, possessing an ideal body, having nice material possessions, and from that we have developed the concept of being a high value man. I don't really know when this term became popularized, but I first heard it from now deceased manosphere juggernaut Kevin Samuels.
Our value has been with us forever. There's always been a ranking system, irrespective of race, culture, period of time. You will see higher value men, higher value individuals separate or be separated from the pack. That is how this works. If you want more options or more favorable outcomes, you need to increase your overall value.
I don't think it's hard to imagine my opinion on Kevin Samuels, but if you would like to know it more explicitly, you can check out my video on the Black Manosphere. That said, in brief, I would often hear Samuels discuss this concept of a man's value in response to men watching his content who sought certain types of women but lacked the perceived value to get them. And since then, I feel like that phrase has been a staple of certain self-help oriented parts of male interest media to purportedly teach young men and boys how to really be high value men. So some of this is in physical appearance and how you dress, but a lot of it deals with economic hustles, which are often basically get rich quick schemes or outright scams or pyramid schemes. And other times it's dubious ventures into cryptocurrency and NFTs or Amazon drop shipping or some other alternative method for non-traditional work. And all of this, in some rare cases, I'm sure will make a guy rich, and maybe in combination with some looks maxing and some fashion advice, make them definitely more viable on the dating market. That is a plausible outcome, but it's very, very rare. Having money will again make you more appealing to women. This is not some secret red pill truth. This is just a reality for numerous reasons, but having money doesn't make you valuable. More importantly, that won't guarantee having more access to women, or more importantly, that having this access to women will give you the feelings of self-worth that you were seeking out in the first place.
The idea of like how they've commodified sex, like it's very similar to money. It's in the same sense, and I think it contextualizes this conversation of, a poor guy who happens onto a lot of money all of a sudden. And then part of how they keep making money is like they tell other poor people how to make money. And they're all kind of deceptive get rich quick schemes. Like that's why people pay so much for these like programs and stuff like that. Similarly, it's like to tell somebody like, you should be healthy, you should, treat people a certain way, you should focus on your passions and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, but what I want to hear specifically is like, what color shirt should I wear in the club?
And this is all beside the fact that, again, this shit usually doesn't work. This type of hustle culture has far, far, far more losers than winners. And you mostly end up making the person who made up the hustle rich. That is what they're really designed to do. RIP to all the cryptocurrency commercials that weren't in the Super Bowl this year, because that shit was gone.
And I'm never wrong about this stuff. Never.
But more importantly, even if you did make it big doing drop shipping or whatever, hyper-focusing or maximizing your economic status as a man for the sake of being more desirable is basically like investing in obsolete technology. When I was at the age of a lot of you watching, the number one smartphone in the market was something called a BlackBerry. iPhones barely existed. Androids didn't exist at all. There were other smartphones, but the BlackBerry was the smartphone for serious business people. And that was their brand. They basically were like, you guys with your little cameras and your apps and your music players, all cute and whatever, but when it's time for real serious business, you're gonna wanna own a BlackBerry. And look at this thing. It is hideous. And this is like in the 2010s, it still looked like this. It didn't even come out with a touchscreen until the 2010s. And by then, serious business people realized that it was much better and more convenient to have one device that could do multiple things and not just send an email. People got used to using touchscreens, and the BlackBerry could never reclaim its dominance over the cell phone market. It went the way of the dinosaur. In a word, it was evolution, and to adopt some language from the manosphere types, it was survivor of the fittest. And you know what else is going the way of the dinosaur? The idealized, high-value, bread-winning man who can support a wife and a family all by himself off one job, buy a house, retire with a pension, and live a good, simple life. That shit is very, very rare. Again, I'll avoid using phrases like late capitalism and workers' rights and all that good stuff, but I'll just say, if you do want your trad wife, consider maybe unionizing. Just an idea. Either way, the time where one man could support a whole household with one job is over. And even for those few high-value men with high-paying tech jobs or even entrepreneurial ventures, those features are simply less desirable than they were 50 or 60 years ago. The idea of the trophy wife is a myth and has always been a myth. Beauty and attractiveness is always important when picking a partner, but people tend to mostly partner with people within the same education and socioeconomic bracket that they are in. As I've said before, doctors marry doctors, techies marry techies, lawyers marry lawyers, and so on. The overinvestment for men into archaic images of status and economic viability ignores the actual trends in human relationships and the way that things are moving into the future, namely that women don't care as much how much money you make and whether or not you have a good job like they did 40 or 50 years ago. The biggest factor in the change in dating dynamics that seems to be actively avoided, or more accurately, attacked by manosphere folks, is the fact that women need men less today than they ever have. And they will need men less in the future. And if you pay attention to a lot of the undertones of manosphere rhetoric, a significant portion of what they're saying is basically crying and whining over the fact that now that a woman can get a job, he has to take more showers and learn a skill and maybe read some books. Which is why other parts of their rhetoric are prophesying on the cold, scary future where women will finally need men like they used to back in the good old days, when men went out to hunt and women stayed home and all that shit. Winter is coming is something that they say a lot in their circles. And they've been saying it for decades now.
Well, the winter's coming though, ladies. And what does it mean? Well, whenever Ned Stark or anybody from House Stark would say winter is coming, they're not wrong. Hot girl summer is about to be over. And like it or not, everything is coming to an end.
They said it in the recession of the late 2000s. They said it in the presidency of Donald Trump. They said it during COVID. They said it through war. They said it during egg shortages. The reality is that winter has been here for well over a decade, and y'all still aren't getting any. Ironically, but sadly, unsurprisingly, the people suffering the most in these hard times under winter are men who still have not learned to adapt. There's all these podcasts complaining about modern women and not enough teaching you how to be a modern man. Not trying to teach you that the way a man was 40 years ago is the way you should be now. That is, do you hear that out loud? The sad, scary truth revealed through this is how many men are either incapable or uninterested in adjusting to the new reality of what it takes and what it means to be desirable. Specifically, they seem hell-bent on reclaiming a world when men had almost absolute power to dictate the dating market. This modern alpha male content is ironically incredibly beta, because it's mostly operating off of outdated perspectives on what an alpha male is. It's basically trying to reproduce the image of desirability for men that peaked in the 1970s and has been dwindling ever since. It's why, as you look at the landscape of so many men in these manosphere and alpha male creator spaces, the vast majority of them are single or in shallow, exploitative relationships that most of their viewers wouldn't want to be in. If being an alpha male was real, which it isn't, what that would mean is that said alpha males or high value men would have their choice of the most optimal mates in a given space, not just attention hungry wannabe models who don't mind a little misogyny as long as they can get paid. And they would display this alphaness, this value via whatever means is most desired by those optimal mates. And the thing is, without getting too far into rating scales for women, the most desirable female partners are not going to be as interested in the guy following Gary Vee's dopamine detox garage sale course. Look at the men who are presented as desirable in the media produced by women. Sure, there is still a valuing of certain bodies and certain physical features, but the social and psychological features tend to vary, and the guys that act and present more like your typical alpha male influencer are more likely to be the villain or the guy that gets left behind than the main love interest. Or furthermore, in media that's not necessarily made for women, but features a lot of different types of men, you'll notice the male characters that women thirst over aren't the idealized hypermasculine characters that the boys are there for, but they're the more sensitive, interesting, or complex men that the women actually end up being drawn to. It calls into question what we mean when we say high value. If you level yourself up in the way that these guys tend to promote and create personas along the lines of the way these guys advise, it is true, you will become more appealing to some women. But again, the uncomfortable question is, what type of women? I don't want to encroach upon the idea that specific types of women are unworthy of partnering or don't deserve love, but I don't think it's controversial to say that some 20-year-old shy guy just trying to figure out how to talk to women from Fresh and Fit probably wouldn't be a good match for the type of women that would come on a Fresh and Fit show. Like, did you see what happened when they were faced with Brittany Renner? This is who they really are.
Well, I think, first of all, let's bring it back a couple notches. Okay, so there's really a lot to unpack here, because my first question to you is, what do you gain from telling girls that they're not special? How does that make you feel? I mean, I know everything is a joke, but I'm asking you a real question. So how does that make you feel? Because if I say you're, that does something for me, right? If I insult you, or if I tell you you're not special, you're forgettable, what does that do for me? No, but that doesn't, that's what I'm saying. No, but I'm saying, what if I call you, if I just say that, again, you're forgettable. That's why I didn't want to do you guys' podcast. Forgettable. Hate the setup. The name is underwhelming. I didn't really see the value in it. Right?
No,
that's how I feel, right? But so that's fine. But for me, that's okay if it wasn't a fit for me. But I also don't need to, you know, in a way kind of try to devalue what.
This is probably who you really are. You are not built to handle Brittany Renner, and that's okay. Find something else to do. Money isn't value. Clout isn't value. Good looks aren't value. Value is value, and value differs across time, age, race, regional affiliation, community, etc. And despite what folks will tell you, being this explicit, singular, regressive image of masculinity is not what it's all about in 2023 and hasn't been since 2003, if it actually ever was. But this brings us to another concerning question. Why do we as men have such a narrow vision of desirability about ourselves? Why do we consistently ignore or misunderstand the information that women give us freely about what they desire? Who is to blame for our obliviousness in this area? And why are so many guys getting rich off giving bad advice while so many other men are suffering in an epidemic of loneliness? If men have a warped, essentially bad sense of what women find desirable, the pressing question is why? Why are so many men taking bad Tinder pictures and scaring away women with alpha male talking points? Why have women been depicting in media exactly who they find most attractive for decades, yet men still keep missing the mark? There's a joke about finding the clit somewhere in there, I'm sure, but I'm not gonna do it this time.
Masculinity to in an effort to be attracted or to be courted. It has changed over time. Like I said, I looked and felt and was different before when I was younger. When I was like involved in sports, it was very much like things are pretty easy because you're just constantly involved in like the social dynamics of like being in community, like you're talking about like a fraternity or something like that. It's a similar thing. Over time though, I think what's come to be a part of my identity is things like humor, like just being funny in a context where you're meeting people and hanging out, and that becomes a part of the way that like you attract people. Some people think like they just aren't naturally funny or they're like introverted and everything like that. And I get that there's like different situations and stuff. But for me, that's kind of how I identify with attractiveness. And I think there's certain things that like that build confidence in sort of trying and failing to like court someone.
And she really don't care. In fact, actively, she would wish that you didn't do that as much. Like she would wish that like you would be home with her or something to that regard. And I think that like the personality aspect, especially what you were talking about, is something that people don't realize that often, that sexiness is a state of mind. Like being attractive is a state of mind. It's an ineffable quality that can't necessarily be reproduced. Pete Davidson and fellas like that, I mean, like with all the rumors and everything around him, but regardless on like the reason why he's able to date at that level and to get proximity to the women that he has isn't due to his looks totally. I mean, of course there's money, you have to bring in capitalism and everything in like that equation, but it's also because he looks like a chill, funny dude. Like he looks like if I talk to him, like I'll be happy around him.
Yeah, women seem happy around him.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Look at Ariana. You look at
that picture is so iconic. Where she's got like the lollipop in her mouth because she looks like she's just really happy to be there. The culprit behind this culture of misinformation is not just the manosphere. The manosphere are a symptom of a larger problem in the way that men and boys are socialized. To illustrate this, I want to talk about a man who never let having a weak jawline keep him down, Andrew Tate. At the top of the year, in the wake of Andrew Tate being arrested for sex trafficking, a lot of people kept asking, how is it that he ever got so big in the first place? For one, he's clearly a dork and obviously unserious figure just saying ridiculous things for the sake of getting attention. I would argue that a large portion of his viewers are people who genuinely just find him funny to see and look at and find his antics amusing and are not taking any of his so-called advice seriously. But others that do take him seriously say that he wanted to help men and was inspirational, but it's just as obvious that he was often incredibly demeaning and abusive to the boys and men who followed him. He was exposed countless times for being a grifter and abuser, and he often talked about sex and happiness in a way like that doesn't sound like anything anyone should want. He is truly a bizarre creature. But on the internet, for young men and boys who spend too much time there, he's kind of par for the course. Cartoonish male figures have always done well here, relying on emotionally underdeveloped, vulnerable boys and men to fill up their audience. But still, none have done as well as Tate in such a short time. So why would he ever amass such a large following? The reason isn't because he was a positive figure for boys. He clearly wasn't. The ugly and scary reality is that boys and men brought up under patriarchy are groomed from pretty much birth to be predisposed to find this type of toxic, absurd misogyny empowering and appealing. I finally said the word that I know you guys have been conditioned to not take seriously, good old patriarchy. But before you click off and close your ears, just follow me for a second. If you've made it this far, you might as well hear me out. To define it simply, patriarchy is a social system that seeks to enfranchise and privilege men, often via the marginalization of women, but also in actuality, a lot of men too. And not just queer, disabled, black, or poor men, but all men in general. The thing that is often missing from the conversation around patriarchy is that while all men benefit from patriarchy in some way, only a small percentage of men actually control and benefit from patriarchy without the consequences of what patriarchy gives back to men. And this is not to undermine the fact that it does affect men differently based on gender, race, and economic status. For example, historically, Asian men have been marginalized in a unique way in the Western world. In her book, Asian Sexual Politics, a book I suggest for everyone, but especially Southeast or Eastern Asian people who are seeking an analysis explicitly on Asian sexuality, Dr. Rosalind Chow talks about the caricatures of Asian men being hypomasculine, which is the opposite of hypermasculine, as in being emasculated solely based on race, ethnicity, or phenotype of being Asian.
Again, it's not like all these stereotypes have like a lot of negative stuff. Some of them, quote unquote, are good stereotypes. I don't want to get into that, but with South Asian men, it's not flattering. And I like
there's no way to twist it.
It's like basically how I could put it in one little nugget. I hate the show Big Bang Theory. I watched a few episodes, but man, it's basically like that brown guy that is played. He's just the classic brown guy that you see in most of Western media, which is he's a nerd, he's sexually repressed, physically useless, probably smells and has no skills or no ability to attract a woman, and he's just like a scrawny little loser. And again, these are all very negative ways of putting it, but that's kind of like, as a child, that's kind of like all I saw, especially in like Canada and like where I personally grew up with like for my own doing, for my family's doing, whatever, I grew up pretty like whitewashed and actively avoiding my own culture. So I never even saw like a lot of Bollywood or a lot of like even that media early on. So it was really just that. And I always felt like I was fighting against that.
Yeah.
That's I play sports. I play football. I played hockey.
But what you see oftentimes, and I will never say like K-pop fandom can only be sort of defined by people's like desire to like, just like, oh, they really like Asian people, they want a nice Asian boy to like fetishize. It's so many Asian, like there's so many K-pop fans that are like have a much deeper connection with the artist. But a lot of what you see commonly, like what's socialized and what's normalized in part by the industry's efforts, is this idea of here's this cute guy, like here's this this fetishizable person. It's like a self-orientalism. I explore this and I get into sort of this character that I bring around sometimes that is sort of this subversion commentary on the sort of K-pop boy, Asian boy idea that I'm all like it's part of the conflict within me, because it's like partially like I see what you see in me, and a lot of what I see that you see in me is not cool. But I also like this. Like I also like makeup. I also like being accepted. I also like that these things are here. A lot of this is cool to me, and I'm parsing it. And so that's sort of the way that the dynamic works as well. You know, we sometimes like, I mean, it's a very common experience, honestly, for any East Asian person, let's say, to be on, for instance, a dating app, and everybody that you match with is like, I'm really into anime. I'm really into K-pop.
This is historically relevant in Western media, where Asian men were always presented as weak, sneaky, effeminate, etc. These types of issues often inform how Asian men see themselves and respond to their perceived value on the dating market. On the flip side, black men are perceived to enjoy a perpetual state of fetishization. Men like myself, or foreign men, or my kickboxing coach are expected to adhere to this mandingo masculinity, which is around black men's sexual behavior. I've already made a video about this, so I won't rehash everything, but I do want to point out that this severely stifles how Black men are expected to show up to the rest of the world in order to be seen as desirable. Trans men and other queer men also find themselves relegated to marginalized statuses because patriarchy asserts that they are not real men. Thus, trans men sometimes struggle to find partnerships with cis women, and bisexual men are often either forced to deny their bisexuality or risk being invisibilized in the dating market. So yes, while patriarchy tends to privilege men in a variety of ways, and yes, this does include all those previously mentioned marginalized men, it does not privilege all men equally, nor does it give more than it takes from almost any man that isn't on the top of that hierarchy. Yet, all men are beholden to the standards and expectations of patriarchy. Thus, any man who isn't man enough under patriarchy can be punished through social sanction, bullying, violence, sexual assault, etc. I cover all of this more in depth in my first two Manosphere videos, but one main takeaway that I want people to get is that patriarchy has boys and men convinced that performing masculinity in a specific way means they will attain a level of status and respect and possibly even desirability. This is the bargain that men and boys are sold when we're very little, a bargain that many of us realize isn't real by the time we hit puberty. In fact, if we were to lend credence to the concept of getting red-pilled, I'd argue that the real red pill is becoming aware of how society lies to boys in order to convince them to self-mutilate their humanity in the hopes that this will allow them to be better, stronger men. The real wake-up moment is recognizing that adhering to and reproducing patriarchy really only serves a few in our society, and the energy we spend attacking and blaming women is exactly what the so-called matrix wants you to do. Because as long as you are attacking and blaming women for the things you don't have in your life, you will never turn your anger to the actual system doing you harm. But it's hard to get that message across because everything that men and boys will learn about masculinity from the time that they're little tells them the opposite. But a buffoon, again like Andrew Tate, can take advantage of this preconditioning and literally sell men and boys anything based greatly on the imagery and promises of patriarchy. By giving them the exact lies that they were told when they were young, he can tell them brand new lies as they get older. To be fair, it's clear that in between the ridiculousness, Tate has a bombastic, charismatic persona, and he seems to be highly intelligent and calculating about his image. And he is successful and lives a successful lifestyle. But that still doesn't really explain why he was able to convince grown men to pay him $5,000 to be forced into a cage fight with professional fighters to prove that they're really top G's. When you see the young nature of many of Tate's fans who don't know the difference between a cool guy and a buffoon, you realize it comes down to a term that many conservatives often ironically employ to attack the LGBTQ community. But in reality, what we're really dealing with is something that's been happening to children, especially boys, for generations. That word is grooming. As in grooming little boys to accept and reinforce certain norms around how a real man is supposed to act. So I'm gonna try something a little different. I'm gonna try something I saw off TikTok, but add my spin to it. And I want you to put 5 fingers up and follow along. Put a finger down if your children's toys or bedroom or favorite TV shows or whatever things that you liked as a kid were strictly policed to be appropriate for boys. Put a finger down if you've ever been shamed for doing something like a girl, such as showing emotions, liking aesthetic things, being nurturing, showing genuine affection, not enjoying sports, or having the wrong hobby. Put a finger down if you've ever acted gay with the homies or engaged in homoerotic humor with your heterosexual male friends. Put a finger down if you've ever felt like you had to respond to some form of conflict with violence or risk being seen as weak. Put a finger down if you were told not to cry as a child because boys don't cry, especially if this came from an actual adult and you were like 4. I could go on forever with this game about how boys are pressured into becoming sexually active before they are ready, and how when boys are molested by adult women, no one ever sees those boys as victims. I can go on about how boys are conditioned to push down their emotions for fear of being seen as weak and hold all that negative energy in until it explodes. Hell, there's even an unspoken set of etiquette for how men are expected to enter a bathroom and use urinals. Something is wrong with us. I guarantee you that the majority of young men and boys playing alone have their hands balled in a fist, probably shaking it in fury as some painful, maybe intrusive memories come washing over them right now. So if you have any issue with some of the things I just mentioned there, I want to ask you, gentlemen, was this a choice or were you groomed? Did you choose not to cry when you were 4 years old because you got hurt or pushed down or bullied or dropped your fucking ice cream? Or was there an adult there, a man or a woman, yelling at you as a child not to cry, punishing you for having a very normal human emotion? Watching adults tell young boys not to cry is one of the most horrifyingly abusive things that you will still see done in public. And the whole goal of this is to groom that child, that young man, to begin to distrust and dislike his natural human emotions so that he can be a real man later in life. And then we wonder why all these real men are unaliving themselves later in life because they lack effective emotional development and regulation. And the thing that frustrates me to no end is I will see manosphere types and MGTOW types and incels talk about this stuff and then blame women. This is patriarchy. Feminism did not create patriarchy, it only named it. And yes, there is a very obnoxious, very white pop feminism that has existed since the late 2010s and was on Tumblr. And you can't objectively ignore how pop girl boss feminism has been weaponized to dunk on men regardless of the situation and essentialize an inherent evil into men as if we were somehow born with this emotional disability that many of us are groomed to have. This does not help. I understand why you bought your male tears mug, but it's not very helpful. You should probably put that away. Boys and men are not born to become Andrew Tate or Andrew Tate fans. We are groomed, and a perfect example of that is Andrew Tate himself. Tate is a product of a lifetime of psychological grooming to produce the toxic misogynist that we know today. Tate carries traumas from his experiences with being bullied growing up as a biracial kid in the US and then a biracial American kid in the UK. More significantly, Tate's father seems to be a horrible guy, a prideful, emotionally abusive man that believed pathologically in severing Tate from any type of emotional balance when he was a child, much like all of us have been, except with Tate, it was much worse and much more effective.
First time I've seen my dad in a year. He gets in the house, he's in the house for about 5 minutes, and my mom's like, yeah, I took him for a haircut, Emery, but I didn't like the way they cut their hair. And my dad's like, what? And then I'm like, yeah, I don't like how they've cut it. Da-da-da. And my dad went nuts. My dad went, you're raising my boys, talking about how their hair looks. They're 10 years old. You got them looking in the mirror like girls. Talk about their hair. What's wrong with you, woman? You're gonna my boys up. And he lost his temper big. I'm all scared and said, oh, Emery, it's the first time I've seen you in a year. This is why we couldn't be together anymore. You're crazy. You're crazy. Called the police and told my dad to leave the house because my dad's saying, look, you can't raise my boys. You're gonna raise them bitches. It's
wild when you hear Tate talk about his father as a great man. And all you hear from the stories that Tate tells about his father is the exact same rhetoric that Tate is giving back to boys and men now. He's clearly describing all the things not to do if you want to raise a boy into a healthy, functioning man. You follow that up with the exploitative experiences in professional combat sports, and you see how all of it is relevant to the allegedly violent pimp grifter that we see and know now. This is not to say that Tate doesn't have agency. The irony of patriarchy is that it teaches boys and men that we have agency and we're supposed to be honorable and respectful. We're all taught not to abuse women. Tate himself has said that men who beat women should be put to death, despite having tons of evidence that he is a man who beats women. But performing masculinity is full of contradictions. It doesn't make sense that we are expected to be leaders and providers and fathers and partners, but also to not have emotions and not care about things and always be alone. Like, again, something is wrong. And so many boys and men know that something is wrong, but they've had this same grooming experience under patriarchy, and they are desperate and lost and depressed and in need of help. Another aspect of grooming is in the media that these boys consume. Whether it be anime or superhero movies, even in media that's more subversive, it's easy to see how strength and power are glamorized for boys, which then translates to how they think they need to appear to be desirable for women. And going back to body image, it doesn't help that male physiques in the media are just as unrealistic and unhealthy for boys as women's bodies are for girls. It's just unfortunate that we don't have the same level of scrutiny on that harm, because that will require us to actually unpack the patriarchal forces behind it. And I've seen manosphere types talk about how shitty it is that male actors will achieve impossible bodies, likely through steroids or other methods that aren't accessible to regular men. And it's incredibly obvious that these men are not natural and their bodies are not maintained through exercise or lots of water or fish or whatever The Rock says he does. Like, The Rock is bigger now in his 50s than he was in his 20s. And he expects us to think that it's all natural. Meanwhile, women in the media at least kind of openly talk about their BBLs and plastic surgeries and wigs and stuff like that. And although this still probably has a very unhealthy effect on girls, at least it's somewhat honest.
I wake up at like 4:15 in the morning every morning. And I'm at the gym. I open up the gym. Like I'm there 5 o'clock and I finish at 6. And that, of course, is time I could be using sleeping. But also, I don't wake up to my wife no more. I can't imagine like the things that like I miss out on because like I'm fasting like this long. Like dinners, I don't have dinner. Like I don't have dinner and I don't have breakfast. Like I only have lunch because like a 20-hour fast, 4-hour eating window, that's really all I could do. Really, it'd be 22 most times. So I eat one meal and that's lunch.
There are boys out here that think they can look like The Rock through hard work, and that is destructive. So incels get this right. They recognize how this double standard affects men, but they blame women as if women control Hollywood. They think the pressure for these men to look like this comes from men trying to appeal desirable to women. But I feel like it should be clear by now that these images aren't for women and girls. They're for young boys, not in a sexual nature, but in an aspirational one, because these are the images that boys are groomed to believe are ideal and should be pursued. But who do you think is really in charge of these images? Who makes a decision on what images get promoted the most? Who consumes most of these images? Like, do you imagine Bell Hooks and Judith Butler in a room saying, okay, let's make sure Captain America's chest glistens when he gets up from the table, and make sure to zoom in on that bicep when he grabs the helicopter? No, that's for us, first and foremost, because we think that's cool. It speaks to our ideals as men. And sure, I'm sure there are lots of fans of that imagery who are women, but it's not designed with them in mind. It's designed with us in mind. Think about how rare it is to see short or fat men's bodies be depicted as desirable, and then think about how many short or fat guys you know with girlfriends, with attractive girlfriends and wives. It clearly doesn't match up to the media. And when we do get images of men who are fat or short or both in romantic situations, it's almost always played for laughs, as if it's laughable that any woman would actually desire to be with a man who wasn't ideally the masculine image. And the irony is that, no, it's not women making this stuff up. It's short, fat guys directing, producing, and greenlighting these images to be put on our screen. The psychology of patriarchy is so entrenched that even when given the power to shape the images, these men still default to images that patriarchy says are good, that they themselves don't even belong to.
It is interesting to study where this fat guy trope comes from, right? I was watching Mina Lay's video on like the history of dieting and weight loss, and you know how we go through these times in which like being a heftier man was seen as a status symbol. Then we went through, you know, David Bowie and going okay Stenny, and now we're sort of at this like Chris Hemsworth Iron Man type impossible, basically the male slim thick, right? Right. But like
thank you for that. That's definitely going in the video.
Right. And the reason why I bring that up for like they present it for who? Who are they presenting it for? Because like I talk to my femme friends and they're like, you know, like even though they like Idris Elba, they don't like all the muscular Marvel superheroes. They're like, he's too big. He seems hard. It feels like if I like put my head on it, it'd be like cold. Put a head on his chest, it'd be cold. You know, like who started this trope association of the chubbier guy, the heftier guy, not pulling women? Was that even ever true? But it has been men, I feel like, right, who are in these writer rooms who are saying like, no, actually, I kind of want to make fun of the fat guy. Because like because we have our own thing. Whereas like in our own locker room culture, like the fat guy's the fat boy, if it's not football, he's the water boy. He can't run, he sweats, he plays video games, he doesn't get girls.
When Jack Black stars in a whole movie where the whole joke is that he's chubby and short and shouldn't be with a beautiful woman, it's two dudes that look just like Jack Black in the writing chair laughing at themselves. And it's those same type of men directing Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pratt through their obligatory no shirt scenes in a Marvel movie. And so fast forward and we have men and boys growing up with massive body image issues contributing to the massive mental health crisis for men and boys that we're dealing with today. And yes, that crisis is greatly being ignored, but it's not being ignored at the behest of women. It's being ignored. It's so funny as I watch this manosphere and quasi-manosphere content. Not all of them try to blame this crisis of loneliness for men on women, but so few have the fucking balls to point out that the people in control of all the things that cause men the most harm are other men. If you're really serious about addressing those problems and you're not talking about patriarchy, then you're not serious. The media doesn't take this issue serious because this is patriarchy working as designed. The truth of the matter is there's a crisis of loneliness and unaliving for men because that's what's supposed to happen. I want to again be clear. The dating world has changed. The era where men completely decided the terms of relationships and could attract viable partners based solely off their income from a union-backed factory job are over. And more importantly, please understand this, those days are not coming back. We will never again live in that world. The quicker you understand that, the quicker you can actually start making yourself more viable as a prospective partner. Any dating advice that treats you like a main character in a role-playing game, trying to get you to level up artificial stats to be viable in the dating meta, is not good dating advice because it's not treating you or the people you're trying to partner with as full human beings. So you might be asking then, what is good dating advice? And you're not gonna like what I have to offer. My advice is be yourself. Okay, so let me explain. I rewrote this section like a bunch of times because like I had this great analogy about fighting games and but I realized it was best to keep it simple and explain that this concept of being yourself isn't the lazy, useless advice that we often depict it to be. It's actually a really sound and useful starting point. The best place to start, in fact, if you ask me. People tend to say be yourself, knowing that being yourself may not be what you're trying to do in the moment. But they say it because the reality of attraction and desirability is too complicated for anyone to effectively break it down and tell you exactly what to do. At best, you'll get this gamified and ethically dubious strategy that makes you treat women like a boss battle. That's the type of stuff that gets taught by pickup artists, strategies like dialogue trees that will lead you to the result that you desire, which, I mean, I guess that's a form of success, but does that seem like a good thing to you? People say be yourself because they understand that the concept of making significant changes to who you are for the sake of dating doesn't seem like a good thing or an effective thing for anyone to be doing long term. Innately, I think people understand that performing desirability for the sake of dating forces you to be someone you probably are not. And that is dangerous. You might lose yourself in the process. You might become someone really shitty. You may lock yourself into a performance of self for the sake of keeping a partner and make yourself miserable in the process. But then you will likely ask, what if myself gets no maidens? What if myself doesn't shower or doesn't groom or doesn't know how to talk to women, etc.? These are all very good questions. So maybe a better admonishment is be your best self. And most importantly, seek out organic, natural to you ways of self-improvement. But not because it will get you more maidens, but because it will make you feel better about who you are. Because if you feel better about yourself as an individual, you will be that magic word that I haven't mentioned much this video. More confident.
A guy might kind of signal that he finds salvation or fulfillment or actualization, no matter what you want to call it, a sense of emptiness that needs to be filled through sexual validation, for example. And that could be like an incredibly toxic thing. You can see people become like predatory and aggressive because they feel almost entitled. They think like, I need to, I deserve this. Like I need this. This is like literally existentially the only thing that will like make me feel like whole. And you see that with like identity and just when it comes to, I mean, it's a typical critique used with like capitalism, that it's always dangling things that are going to be like an advertisement, like, oh, this will make you happy. This will make you fulfilled. It's probably, I think, maybe the most difficult process of maturation to go through is to realize that there isn't going to be some sort of like larger salvation. And, you know, in terms of desirability, you kind of put into question the whole idea of why do I need to be desired? Do I think once I'm desired, I'll be, you know, validated, I'll be whole? You won't be. Like not everybody's going to find you attractive. You can be the hottest person in the world. Not everybody's going to like fuck with you. And sometimes, ironically, even if you do almost fulfill something like that, you have an insane amount of partners, you know, you're always having sex and stuff. That can actually be the worst thing ever. You can realize that this exact thing you've been chasing is a nightmare. It's not what you wanted. It's the idea in psychoanalysis of like the fantasy should never actually be fulfilled.
I think for me, if I'm being perfectly honest, I experienced a more pronounced interest in women than I had normally had when I started transitioning. And it took me a little bit to realize that it wasn't necessarily like, oh, my sexuality is changing. Maybe I've been like a straight man all along. It was, I have been told that masculinity is based on how appealing you are to women and how interested women are in you. And I was using that as a way to affirm my gender. Like for sure I was doing that. It did give me a lot of empathy for cis men. Like it did. It may have, you know, I came at it from a different angle, but I still experienced that thing where it was like, I need not even female validation. I need people to see that women like me. I need people to see that women are into me because I am a man. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't about the women. It wasn't about them. It wasn't about their interest. It wasn't about their comfort. And thankfully, like I, you know, sat with that long enough that I realized what I was doing before I got into a situation where I was objectifying, you know, any women that I was seeing at the time. Like it wasn't about, I realized, you know, before I could hurt someone that I was in a position where I was going to use someone to validate myself, and not what I'm about. I don't want to do that to someone, right? Like, first of all, at the end of the day, you have you. You know, you have to be best friends with yourself. You have to like who that person is, and you have to be able to stand on your own. If you're utterly alone in the world, who are you without other people to validate you?
Confidence is another tricky and nebulous concept that everyone but a few can describe effectively. But if you ask me, confidence is about feeling like you have a high likelihood of being successful in whatever it is you're doing or trying to do. So to me, the key to confidence is to learn how to feel comfortable in more spaces. And the key to that is to first master a space that's already close to you and master how you feel about yourself. And again, this is too nebulous, too complex of a thing to sit here and teach you with a foolproof plan. I could easily make that up and sell it for $100 on my Patreon, but I'm not going to do that. But I do have one piece of concrete advice for anyone struggling and looking for something explicit to do to start the process. And that is pick up a new hobby. All the research on confidence talks about how confidence is a muscle. It's something that can be developed through experience and experiences of success. And so one way to do that naturally and organically that won't turn you into a weirdo is to develop a new skill. And in developing that new skill, you develop experiences and confidence in something that enriches who you are. Extra points if that new skill lends itself to communal group activities like fitness or outdoors or horticulture or the arts. Whatever it is, just make sure you enjoy it and that it's something you would do if there were no potential for getting some ass from it. It has to be something you genuinely enrich yourself with. Doing this will do a few things. It will make you just a tad bit more interesting and give you something to talk about. Not too much, hopefully, but something that you're passionate about that you can use to connect with others. Women like seeing men in their bag. They like seeing men emote and get excited or be good at something. They like knowing that a man has a persona and humanity outside of just seeking women. Another thing is that developing a new skill will make you feel better about yourself. And when you get good at it, when you challenge yourself in something and grow yourself a person just that tiny bit, that will bleed into other aspects of how you present to the world and help reduce negative self-talk and self-image that is probably hindering your ability to talk to girls right now. And lastly, if you're smart or lucky, whatever new thing you're starting to do, we'll also have some women involved, and that will open up an opportunity to organically bond through a shared interest. Historically, most relationships and couples tend to share career paths or hobbies or just, local community interests. Sure, there are opposites that attract to each other, but a big part of finding partners is just finding people you like as people before you decide you want to date. And a lot of that comes from shared interests and shared spaces. So in terms of concrete dating advice, that's as far as I'm willing to go, to be honest. For now, at least. Maybe I'll think of something else when this video's over. But I think a lot of dudes in this space just find the ethical gray zone of teaching strategies to use on another human being not really the thing we like. Women are not collectibles. They're not Xbox achievements. They don't give XP to you to level up your masculinity meter. And when they're treated like that, they tend not to appreciate it. Further, and here's the key thing, if you're lonely, a new woman is not the solution to that issue. And treating it as such is not a way to develop any type of healthy relationship, nor fix whatever it is in you that's making you lonely. In fact, you're probably likely to have a pretty shitty experience and be pretty shitty to whoever you're partnered with if that's why you're partnering with them. On the flip side, regardless of your body type, your facial features, whether your beard connects or whether it doesn't, I guarantee you there is a fan base that is interested in who you are and what you do. You probably are already desirable in the eyes of someone you know on some level. And increasing your desirability is going to hinge much more on growing yourself as a person and building up your confidence organically versus growing your bank account or your biceps. I cannot stress this enough. Women are telling you outright that they want companionship, stimulating conversations, support, and good sex. They're not as interested in Bugattis as you think. And I'm telling you, if a girl's telling you that she really likes a Bugatti, you probably need to find another girl to be attracted to. This video cannot and does not purport to fix your self-esteem. This is not a surefire way into the heart of the object of your affection. I am no expert in these things. And anyone that tells you they have the secret to all of this is lying to you, because that secret would be worth way more than what you can afford watching a YouTube video. This shit is complicated and hard. And for those with a lot of work to do, it will be a slow, difficult process. But it is possible, especially if you stop wasting your time being led by the blind. Me and my wife met when we were very young, and we grew together. And the thing that we both had that made us work, there was not some type of true love, some type of soulmate nonsense. We just both wanted to be the best people possible and found each other in the process of doing that. And through that, built a good life together. That is what you should be pursuing. Or you could get a Bugatti. If you watch this video and you still want your Bugatti, Go off, King. That's all I got for today, y'all. Peace.
Thank you.